Welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navic's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navic.co. This episode is brought to you by TikTok. TikTok wants to remind you that Q5, the marketing period right after the holidays, is a prime season for mobile game publishers to maximize their impact and build momentum that lasts well into the new year. Q5 offers unique marketing efficiencies with up to 28% cost reductions in top markets, making it ideal for engaging audiences and optimizing ad spend. Powered by automation and precision, TikTok's advanced product solutions work seamlessly with its newest creative tools, making content creation easy, effective, and scalable to drive installs and boost in-game revenue. Learn more about making the most of Q5 with TikTok by visiting the link in the show notes. Make sure to check it out, and with that, let's dive into the episode.
Welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, David Taylor, and today we're diving deep into the world of gaming innovation with a guest who's been at the forefront of some of the industry's most exciting trends, from enabling user-generated content for iconic franchises like The Sims and Skate, to launching the first commercially successful game leveraging AI agents. In this conversation, we'll explore his journey from head of central product management at Electronic Arts to founder and CEO of Proxima, unpack the lessons learned from building UGC systems, and dive into the challenges and opportunities of designing games with AI agents at their core. We'll also hear his thoughts on the future of gaming, from the role of AI and UGC to the innovations that could define the next generation of experiences. So without further ado, Ron Mo, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, David. Excited to be on here.
Yeah, so just to kick us off, could we do a little quick dive into your background, how you arrived to being the founder and CEO of Proxima today?
Sure. Thanks again for giving me this platform. A little bit of background. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Proxima. We're a games company that uses AI to build new interactive experiences. The first experience that we launched last year was a game called Suck Up. It was a game that uses AI agents to create comedic gameplay for players, and we were fortunate that it really took off amongst the player community and across the content creator community. And so today, the game has over a few 100 million streams across YouTube and TikTok and other viewing platforms. Before building Proxima, I ran the central product organization at EA, where we worked with multiple different studios to build systems and improvements within their games, most notably working with Maxis across The Sims and some of the mobile gaming studios as well. I come from a traditional business background. I have an MBA at Wharton. I worked in the strategy team at YouTube at one point in time and so on. But this is spaces I find always fascinating. So love to have that conversation with you.
Awesome. So we'll pop over to the Proxima story a little bit later in the conversation. I'd love to start maybe towards the beginning of your career and talk about UGC, which is obviously part of the industry that I spend a lot of time looking at and love. So maybe we can start just by asking, when you were working on The Sims back in 2018, what were you seeing on the UGC side, and how has the space evolved since you were there for Maxis?
Yeah, I think my experience with UGC actually precedes even 2018 with The Sims. Okay. The first exposure of it was when I worked at YouTube, which of course is all UGC. It's not video games, of course, but it's arguably the biggest platform of UGC content anywhere in the world. When I joined EA in 2018 and started working with Maxis, there were two things that I noticed. One is that Maxis has this enormous corpus, and The Sims has this enormous corpus of user-created content that people are using. Because if you think about what The Sims is, it's a role-playing simulator. It's a way for players to live their dream lives, and that dream life could encompass a lot of different things. And so sometimes it's with content that the game has already, and the game has an incredible amount of content. But sometimes it takes out of the content corpus of what EA has, and that's where UGC really comes in. So really brings to life this sense of play and the sense of infinite play that we're still seeing with The Sims today. The second thing that we were seeing in 2018 was the early rise of Roblox. And this was something that everyone was paying attention to. Many people were paying attention to in the industry, and I was advocating for EA to look in that direction. And when I first saw Roblox, it was maybe 1/50 at the time of the scale that it is today. But as I looked into the tooling and the systems and the monetization of how Roblox works, it's really very similar to YouTube in the sense that you have creator payout, you have creator creator created system. So it's Roblox not a game; it's a platform people to build on. And for me, that was an obvious moment to say that this could happen within, or it was already happening within the video world. It very well may happen and is happening and continues to happen within the video gaming world. So that was a very interesting trend, and I continue to push EA on that front.
Got it. And so when you were at EA, what were I want to sort of better understand how the UGC system on Sims works a little bit, and maybe you can use Roblox as a compare and contrast of what the Sims tool set looks like versus what you were seeing at Roblox at the time.
Yeah, I mean, Sims is a game. Monetizes as a light game. It plays like a game. There's a core loop of a game. And the UGC system essentially is bolted on to the core game itself. So The Sims has a gallery of user-created content, and it has a way of curating that content for people to download and install the game. There is a set of tools that creators can use to build and upload. But the difference is it's not a platform. And so the gallery and other user-created contents were used in conjunction with what the existing assets of the game are. The second thing is that it's not monetized. So like most games, I say 99% of games, UGC content is not monetized, which means creators are building these assets purely for the satisfaction of themselves and of other people, which is it's a very noble cause, but it's a different incentive system. And the third, I think, is there's one piece around having a bunch of assets. There is another very deep capability around how do you orchestrate and curate and surface these assets and gameplays to the players themselves, which is, as the amount of content gets bigger, it becomes bigger and bigger challenge. Do you surface that couch? Do you surface this particular gameplay mode? And that's really about a recommendation engine, and that wasn't really thought through very thoroughly by EA and most other game developer, I would say.
Got it. And so, yeah, on that note, I guess, what were the benefits and drawbacks of implementing the UGC systems? I imagine when you looked at Roblox, you saw a lot of opportunity for what you could bring to The Sims, but obviously feasibility is always, the gating factor here. And so I'm curious, when you were leading the UGC side, what were some of the opportunities that you thought might have been low-hanging fruits versus things that were just going to be too much work to execute?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And the starting point is, I think it's a business question, which is, what do you want the business to be? Do you want it to be a game that has UGC component to it, or do you want it to be something more than a game? And that has different implications on how you monetize, on what features and tools you build, and how much you commit against that roadmap. And I think that's the big question that we were asking at the time. Even as a game, UGC has enormous benefits. I think one of the biggest, two of the biggest games that have ever been modded, one is Minecraft and one is Elder Scrolls Skyrim. And what the mod has done is that it created new play experience for players that were different than the original, and in which the developer didn't have to invest content against, which means the game lasted longer, which means you drew in more players, which means there's more variety of play, and you can sell through that game for a much longer period of time. And so that's the game model for UGCs. The platform model for UGCs is something very different, which is, can you incentivize creators with monetary incentives to create content for you, whether these are individual creators or small teams of creators. And by sharing that, you're basically offloading some of the development costs and some of the creativity onto the community. You're saying, hey, look, here's a scaffolding, The Sims, in which you can build a whole bunch of great content. We'll share some of the profit with you. Now, that's a different model. And it's, as far as I know, I haven't been with EA for some time, that isn't the model that it's being currently pursued. It's more about the game itself. But I think both are very interesting models.
Yeah, when you look at those two models, I guess I want to ask, like, if you were talking to, another franchise that was considering UGC, what would you guide them to? Would you guide them to the platform model where you're creating, an economy around UGC creation, or would you guide them to sort of the giving players, the tools or the ability to modify their game and create new experiences?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And during the 2020-2021 cycle, when we saw this mass explosion in the metaverse and UGC, I think most people had the thought of, hey, let's go build a platform like Roblox, especially seeing the success Roblox had. The challenge, I think, it is very, very, very difficult to start a platform from scratch, and even more so at this stage when there are already existing platforms like Roblox that you're competing against. After all these years, YouTube is still the dominant long form video content platform, despite a number of people trying to compete against it. And I think that's true for any. So if you're going against the platform model, what you have to bet is that we're going to be a technology business. We're going to spend billions of dollars competing in this arena, and we may not make a cent of profit for a decade. And Roblox still has not made a cent of profit for as far as I realize. I've tracked it more recently, but I think they're still unprofitable. And so for that model, I think both the technical expertise required, the roadmap to get there, and also the payback period, it doesn't make sense for the vast majority of game-first companies, which is mostly our universe. And so what I would actually advise people to say is, probably for the companies that we're thinking about, the EAs, Activision, Blizzards, the Take-Twos with GTA, it's starting with the contents and layer in UGC over time. And we see that be very successful with Minecraft, to some extent with Fortnite and others. So I think there's a way to get there as well.
Got it. In my current role, I oversee the business side of development of a few new franchises, and so I'm sort of, I want to ask, like, if the question is UGC, no UGC, what, like, if I'm making the argument internally that we should be leveraging UGC, what would be the the argument that I would make from both an opportunity but then a cost perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity is, if it's just for UGC for game, it extends the shelf life of the game, expands the playability, it opens up a whole bunch of arenas. But the cost is, there is a real cost in creating the tools to create UGC, to creating the services that if you're hosting the UGC yourself.
Percentage wise of a total project, like, or gross dollar terms, like, what would you say it costs?
I think it really does depends. It depends on the play pattern of the project. If a project, I think, is generally more about free play and exploration, and then it lends itself very well to UGC. The Sims does it very well because essentially it's a dollhouse. That's Will Wright, the creator of The Sims. That's how he pitched it, which is, it's a dollhouse to play in, which means it lends itself to imagination. Minecraft is another example where you can do anything you want, and so you want to bring in all these gizmos and gadgets. The opposite side of the spectrum is a game like League of Legends, right, which is a very rigorous rule set. It's possible for, League of Legends itself came from UGC, but I think investing in UGC for League of Legends may be less fruitful versus investing in UGC versus Minecraft. So there is this balance of, well, what is a game? Who is a core audience? Both from a creator perspective and from a play pattern perspective. I think there's certain genres that lend itself way better for UGC.
Yeah, it sounds like open world one with obviously Elder Scrolls and Minecraft, and then whatever role play game. Some role play games are open world. I wouldn't necessarily describe The Sims as open world because it's fairly restrictive in the exploration side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm still I still want to know, just from a general cost perspective, like, do you think that if you're launching a game, you should be thinking about UGC from the beginning, or is it more of like, let's wait to see if this is big enough to warrant building UGC tools into it?
I think I'm a little bit more pragmatic, and I may say it's let's use the example of Fortnite, which is they didn't have a lot of UGCs or any UGC tools at the beginning, but they found massive success by building upon one of the most popular play patterns at the time, and then they bolted on UGC afterwards, and to extend it works. So I don't know if there's one formula to it, and there's games which UGC came out of tool. The one thing I will say is that UGC is not a panacea for a new game, which is if your game doesn't have an audience, you're not going to have people who are building tools and user creations for that game, because there's no audience in which that creation is served to, and two, people are just interested in playing it. So I think the mistake I think people make is to say that, hey, look, I'm going to build a second-rate game, but we're going to build all these great UGC features, and it's kind of a cold start problem similar to building a platform, which is if your game itself can draw players in of itself, then they can funnel into the UGC part of the game. And so I still think that if you're, unless you're building this kind of tech platform, it's game first. You have to build a game that can stand alone by itself, that can draw mass amounts of audience despite having UGC. And the UGC is a funnel where people go into to create more content and variety and accelerate and accentuate the game, but it doesn't start there.
Yeah. And when I think about like the timelines and the way in which scope creep occurs over the course of a development project, like I find myself like sort of holding my tongue when, as much as excited as I am about the potential of UGC, but when you've got to make the fun happen first, it's hard to say like, oh, like let's put a couple people on building the UGC tools right out of the gate. I think bolting it on after launch, after you show that there is an audience, might make a little bit more sense.
For sure.
This is great. Well, I want to move on to our next topic, which is that, we both write a lot about the video game industry. And so I wanted to spend just a quick brief moment talking about it, because I think that from my perspective, it's like one of the biggest like career hacks you can do is like to be publishing your thoughts and having the world, whoever your audience may be, take it in. So I just wanted to ask, like, I've read your work, on a lot of folks on the Navic side respect you as a thought leader, and really enjoy your articles. So I just want to start off by asking, like, why do you write in the first place? What was the reason you started writing, and we can go from there.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. I love writing, and I totally agree with you, David, that this is totally a career hack for gaming, but for any industry. I started writing during the pandemic, and frankly, I was bored. There was not a lot to do. And I was just writing to organize my own thoughts and think about where the world is heading for the world of interactive media, which is an area that I'm very passionate about. And I didn't think it would lead anywhere. I was fortunate that a couple articles in, one of the articles actually about Roblox was picked up by The Economist. And it was a nice moment where they included one of my charts and cited me as an author, which is kind of cool. Nice. But the other thing that, I bought a couple of copies of The Economist for just to keep it.
Why isn't it framed behind you right now?
But the other thing that it led to was opened a lot of doors in terms of even venture funding. So when I met with Lynn Venture Partners, who was the lead investor for my first round of investment for Proxima, the connection was because they read some of the work that I've written about the space, and so there was some understanding. Of course, it wasn't enough for investment, but it was enough to open the door to a conversation. So I think it's hugely influential to my career, but I didn't really know about that when I started. And I actually haven't written for a while, so thanks for reminding me for that I do it more often.
That's part of why I had you on the podcast, is just to give you a little poke of like, we're ready for the next article. Awesome. Well, and I want to talk a little bit about process, because I think I'm personally fascinated about the creative process and how many different ways there are to be creative. What's sort of your process? How do you decide when you're going to write about something?
I think for me, and again, I haven't written too much, is that I don't try to keep to a calendar. I think that really stifles a lot of thought process. There's once why I did it where I said, okay, well, I'm going to release an article every month or every 2 months or something like that. But sometimes there's nothing to say. And sometimes there's a lot to say, and it takes a lot of time for those thoughts to percolate. One of the razors I have for myself on writing is if I sit at my computer and start jamming the notes of what I wanted to write, and I get really excited and the words just come out, and before I know it, it's 2-3 pages of bullet points, I know that I have something because there's something I wanted to say. And if it's something that just I know I want to write about it because it's current or if it's on trend or popular, but the words won't come out, I think it's a reflection that maybe there isn't as much insight on my end as I thought there may be, even though maybe that's where the world is interested in right now. So I tend to just let what interests me and what fascinates me lead. And if there's a reader on that, then great. If not, then it's better than, catering to an audience when I have nothing to say. That's my process, at least. I'm not sure if that's the best of all worlds.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I think we have similar processes in the sense of, yeah, I don't have a process other than like there's something going on in my head, and then I'm just sort of responding to this need to write it down. I don't actually feel like I'm necessarily like in control of the process. It just sort of happens to me. But I know that there's other people who take a process of like very meticulously, like what are the things that I want to say, and lining it up and then creating an outline and everything. Whereas it sounds like maybe what we do is just like regurgitate this thing that's happening in our subconscious that we're excited about.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, let's move on to Proxima. You mentioned, that this was writing was a key part of, or not a key part, but it definitely benefited in the fundraising process. Maybe we just kick it off by, when you're going through that fundraising process, like what were you telling investors was Proxima's mission, and how is your approach different than other studios?
Yeah, I think the fundraising process changed a lot over the last 3 years, and that's the first thing to note. I think we started in 2021, and this was an incredible, in hindsight, probably the most incredible period in history of funding for interactive entertainment and games because of all the growth the industry saw during the pandemic, plus low interest rate, plus narratives around the metaverse and all that. And so to raise the first round of capital to say, okay, we're going to go build these games that are going to do this and that, it was really not hard at the time. I had somewhat of a reputation within the industry a little bit, and some investors say, okay, we're going to build upon what have already came before. At the time, AI wasn't even out, so we didn't really have AI, or AI was out, but the iteration of the modern LLMs as it stands today wasn't really readily accessible. And so that wasn't really part of the picture. What became really difficult, and that was a small round, so that was a pre-seed to kind of get an initial team going. What was really challenging was the rounds that came after.
But wait, before we get there,
Yeah.
this was at the end of the crypto bubble, right? In 2021.
That's right.
So were you pitching a crypto game at that time, or what were you sort of pitching?
I think it's a question that everybody asks. And frankly, I would say 80% of all companies, gaming companies that were funded at the time, whether they end up using crypto or not, probably pitch some version of, hey, we're going to use crypto to do something because it was the way in which people got funded. We took a look at the space quite deeply. We built some stuff. So before Startup, we built another game called Umari, which is a pet collections game, not so dissimilar to Power World actually. But it was a project that was too big for us to complete given the size of our team and funding. We thought about, hey, is there an opportunity to tokenize some of these real world assets as games have done, and move in that space? And the answer, I think the conclusion that we came to was that it wasn't appropriate for the game that we were building, just because the audience at the time, and still is, I think the crypto world is the thing that the people really care about is how do you generate returns.
Yeah.
Right. And how do you gamify the generation of returns? And that's not on a knock on the industry. It's just that's the real world. And I think and there's tons of people who are building gamifications or games on cryptos. Or what if we build League of Legends on crypto? What if we build Halo on crypto and so on? But I think the real draw for crypto is it's about the thrill of, frankly, gambling. Right, betting on meme coins or betting on this and that, and the gamification of that actually doesn't have anything to do with games. There's an application I think recently called Pump.Fun, which you're just creating meme coins from nothing, and people are betting on it. But it's not a game in the traditional sense, but it creates gamified dopamine rushes, and it's probably the best crypto game. But it wasn't an audience that we felt like we understood to serve. And so we didn't end up launching anything related to crypto. But it was very difficult as a game company to stay entirely away from the area in 2021, 2022, when most of it was that.
Got it. And so that was sort of your first funding round. Did you need to raise the second round in order to get to what you ultimately became your debut game of Suck Up?
Yeah, we didn't raise a second round, but we had to raise some bridge capital. And that was 2020, end of 2022, beginning 2023. And then also a little bit more in 2023 itself. And it was night and day. I remember in 2021, we were just building heads down. There was nothing about the company, who we are. And I would get LinkedIn messages every couple of days about people wanting to put money into the business. And there was a moment in time where it just all stopped, and no matter what happened, it was not possible. And in hindsight, I think it's actually a good reflection of the exuberance that we came in. And I think we saw a lot of overfunding of companies during this period of time. And there's some really amazingly talented founders as well, but the business model of funding these massive rounds for games, pre-launch, has not been overall successful. So I think it is a moment of reflection, but it was a really tough time. But it took that. And I think the second thing we took was that we initially went down the route of, let's go build a game that on the scale of Power or something. So 15, 20 people, but not massive, but also required a couple $1 million to build. And at some point we released the pre-alpha that tested quite well, but it was impossible to get the capital to require to get to the next milestones without massive dilution. And at some point we looked at ourselves and said, we can keep going down this road, but I don't think we'll get there, or we'll get there with a lot of pain that probably isn't necessary. And so we at some point made the hard decision to say, okay, we're going to park all that and we're going to build a game that can be contained to a small size team, which we were only 5 people at the time, that we can ship in a quick amount of time, that we have high confidence in actually making revenue for ourselves. And that's the only way to survive during that period of time.
So at that moment, did you have an idea of what you wanted to build, or were you just sort of like, this isn't going to work, we got to find something else?
It's the first, I think, or sorry, it's the second. I think there was a few criterias that we had. One of it was we have to build this fairly quickly, something within less than 6 months, which is incredibly fast for the world of video games. So launch and ship and test and deploy in 6 months. The second is that we didn't have a marketing budget. So we had to rely on the game being natively able to drive virality in itself. It's the only way in which we can build. And so the two criteria that we had was we have to build in less than 6 months, and we had zero marketing dollars against this. And so, but that constraint really forces us to think about what are the type of experiences that have the potential to go viral. What does virality actually look like? And how do you build fast against it? And we literally had I think a Figma board of 100+ different ideas against those constraints, and it was some of the most creative time I think as a team.
Amazing. So how many Figma sessions are we talking till we got to the winner?
I didn't remember, but it was a lot of long Figma conversations. But it was fun. It was a time when ChatGPT had launched, I think maybe 7 months ago or 9 months ago. We had built something actually quite remarkable in our previous game with AI, which is actually more advanced than what we did with Suckup, which is we used, and there's videos of it on our website, you can still see, we had these pets, and you can actually use voice commands to talk to your pets and play with your pets. So if you say, hey, let's go play hide and seek, it will just go hide under a bush because it recognizes the environment. We gave the LLMs control for the game commands itself, so it can be iterate, so you can do intent to actions, so you can drive action. So it was very agentic way, and that was in 2022, or 2023, so much earlier than the agent conversations that's been happening in the AI today. That game, that experience was a good prototype to say, hey, look, we can actually build with AI as a team. We have the capabilities internally. But that game in particular was just really long and hard to build. So when we thought about Suckup, it was something that even within AI, we can grapple and wrestle with it within 6 months.
What I love about Suckup is it leverages the imprecision of AI as like a feature, which I thought was really well done. It's like the player experiences. Let's see what I can say to convince this NPC to let me into their house so I can suck their blood. And by the way, we should probably do just a quick intro of what Suckup is, just so that people have that context in case they haven't seen it. Also, I highly recommend just going online and looking at some of the creator content because it's hilarious. So I mean, we'll get into more detail, but let me just finish the question, which is it seems so perfectly balanced to leverage the capabilities of AI. And I'm just wondering, did that take user testing in order to get to a place where you're okay, we're using the sort of what many people call a bug in AI, but we're actually leveraging that as a feature? Or did you have that through the Figma boarding that you were doing? Do you sort of know of okay, we know that there's this sort of limitation with LLMs today. Let's actually turn that into a fun experience.
Yeah, again, we were really short on time and runway and all that, so we didn't have a lot of room. We did friends and family testing, of course, but it wasn't the thing that drove this kind of long duration. We just kind of built it. I think the kernel of it is, Suckup is a town, and you have different houses. You have police, you kind of like GTA style. You have all these things, but the kernel of it is really the experience of talking to one person, right? Whether you can understand that one person, and we can build that very quickly. Actually, we built that in less than a week, and we could test to see if there is a nugget of fun in there, right? And usually, I think for games, it's actually, that nugget is actually quite small, and so you can build that nugget within probably one hackathon session or a week or two, and you can see if it's fun. Of course, you had to build a lot more to make it a game, but we got an insight that it could work fairly early. Now, we didn't know if it was going to take off or anything like that, but it was playable as one, and we had a good time doing it. And then it was about, okay, well, how do we invent the characters of the characters that people can understand? So with people like characters like a Karen or emo teenager or something that like people can probably resonate with. And the third, I think, when we go back to virality, the way that we thought about Suck Up was that at the time that we were building it, it was really about everybody was talking about AI companions. So it was, how do you build a AI companion that can be your best friend or something like that? And we kind of flipped the switch on its head, because for Suck Up, the star is not the AI, the star is the content creators. Suck Up, if you take it is at its most holistic level, it's an improv comedy game. It allows players to express their genius in comedic bullshitting, if you will. And their AI is basically kind of a foil against that, right? It can respond to you, it can do these things, it can acknowledge your joke, it can react to you. But the true genius is really in the content creator, the player and the content creator. And that's the insight that made it really popular. People aren't watching Suck Up videos on YouTube for the AI. They're watching it for what the creator has to say, because the creator is funny. The AI just simply reacts to. And that was kind of the script, I think, that we turned at the time to make this game to be what it is.
Was that an intentional thing, or was that sort of emergent in the game development process?
It's intentional. It was intentional because we had the constraint that we had to go viral, and we looked at we built a deck of what are the factors of virality and how do you drive against that, and how do you think about expectation or subordinating expectations, or building and giving kind of the content creators the ability to express that comedy was very, very important. And there's reasons why games like Build Simulator or these random game or Among Us became really popular, because it allowed the content creators to express their genius, their comedic genius, their dramatic genius in some way, or GTA role playing or something like that. And so how do we kind of continue? And that could be with AI, it doesn't have to be, but that has to be the central nugget for us, because we wanted the content creators to play this game.
When you think about the success of those games that you mentioned, how much of it would you attribute to the streamability of it versus, some game mechanic or fun or player fantasy that they were able to capture?
I think it's two levels. I think there are games in which are fun to stream because it gives an avenue for the content creators to express themselves, and there's games that are fun to play as a common player. If you can have both of those things, and I think Minecraft is a really good example, right? It's such a broad canvas that it allows the content creators to build whatever it wants to and create whatever story arc, but it also was fun for the players to build. GTA is another example. With the role playing, it allows content creators to really create that sense of immersion, but it's also really fun for average person. If you have both those things, your game is going to be an absolute hit, no question about it. But it is very difficult to get both content creators to like something and the players to like something, because those two things are sometimes not the same. One is about how do you have a canvas of creating content or a stage to create content. One, it's about feeling some kind of internal satisfaction and enjoyment. That's why there's so few games that can do both.
Do you think that this is just going to be sort of part of the game developers' playbook going forward? Is everyone's going to be designing for both streamer and player in mind?
I think so. The more that I spend time building in this industry in this moment in time, the more I realize how difficult it is to get attention. It is the most difficult thing, because building the game itself is getting easier and easier with Unity, with Unreal, with blueprints, with AI. With Roblox, you have 16-year-old kids who can make games. What is really difficult is getting attention, because there's tens of thousands of games that are coming out every year. And how do you and attention shifts really fast in today's world. You can manufacture attention in the way you could in the past. in the past, what you do is you just do brand marketing, right? You blast every billboard with Spider-Man or Hogwarts. But today you have to drive for attention through short form videos, through the collective conscious, and that moves really fast. It could be your game for 3 weeks, and then it's going to move on to something else. But if you can capture that attention for 3 weeks, like things like Lethal Company, things like Powell, you can make $500 million in those 2 weeks. But it's not predictable.
Yeah.
It's not predictable in the sense that you can do with brand marketing or traditional forms of distribution, and that you can engineer it so that you have a broader or greater probability of success, but you can never guarantee it. And that's what I think games today, especially making game content today, is more and more of a bet. It's a gamble, right?
Yeah.
You can move the hands slightly in your favor, right? If you're playing blackjack, you can decide when to hit and when to stay, but you'll never get to 100% probability.
Yeah.
That's where the world is today.
Yeah, and it sounds like you got to throw out the old marketing playbook and start to adopt, the marketing playbook of today, which is to leverage, fairly grassroots streamer base, give them content that they want to engage with, and make sure that it's organic. You can't necessarily pay streamers to do it because then they have to say this is a sponsored post, and I'm just going to say whatever they told me to say.
Yeah, it's very expensive to buy.
Yeah.
We had some Queso and some of the largest streamers who were playing, streamers who had tens of millions of subscribers playing our game for free. Those subscribers playing a sponsored post would be tens or sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars to play a single game. And the payback is just not there for indie games. So unless you're Apex Legends or something like that, the economics would not make sense. And after setup, I had a lot of founders reach out to me to say, how did you guys do it? What was your formula? Like, did you do share, revenue share with content creators? Do you have some kind of a special program and I was kind of naive at the time. No, we just emailed them and DM them and say, hey, come play. But the reason why so many people played Suck Up was there's one person who played Suck Up. His name is Mad Morph. He had something like 150,000 subscribers at the time. Very, very comedically funny. Just amazing, naturally gifted voice actor. He played Suck Up within a day. I think usually his videos gets around 20,000 views. Within a day, the first video that he came out with Suck Up, he got 1 million views, within a day, which was, and people were like, what is this thing? And within 3 days, we had many, because YouTubers are very smart. They catch on trends like that. And within 2 weeks, we had some of the biggest streamers play a game without ever reaching out to them. And that's just how it works, right? If your game can drive views for people organically good. That's the thing that people want. They don't care about rev share. They don't care about anything else. They care about getting views. And it is not easy. It's not easy to build a game in which gets streamer views.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I want to talk about just sort of the AI component of what you guys were building. Was it hard to introduce AI agents? It sounds like if you guys built this in 6 months, you mentioned you had the capabilities, but is this something that it would be pretty easy for anyone else to replicate?
I think we were very talented from an engineering perspective as a team. Mm-hmm. I think when we launched it, there was so much uncertainty. So, for example, Steam didn't allow anything with anything AI in it. So we basically had to distribute the game ourselves. I think they changed the policy since then. But at the time, we had to basically figure out how to distribute the game ourselves. Which is like, then we have to figure out all payment rails, and which is not super hard, but and sell it ourselves, which usually is never done. But the benefit of it, of course, you keep 100% of the revenue that comes in. But with AI, it works harder time because there's not a lot of infrastructure to support it. And the harder thing, actually, what we did was actually not Suck Up, but the prototype that we built before, the pet that a lot could move, understand environmental awareness, can do a bunch of things and play games with you and do all these things. And that was really, really difficult. And I think we were probably one of the first teams to do it. And people didn't take us super seriously at the time because we were, not the AI company, we were a games company that wasn't founded on AI games, but we did it. I think today, deploying AI is easier. The trick is to figure out how does it benefit the game that you're building, and how does it benefit the loops and the motivations in which you try to satisfy, because it doesn't apply to all situations at all times. And the world is also for AI is still continues to evolve very quickly. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a Chinese model that beat OpenAI on mostly every single metric, and it was 95% cheaper. When we launched, we were really scared that a token cost was gonna make this game unprofitable for us to sell it. We didn't know. The token cost was really, really high at the time. And so when we launched, the other thing
what's a token cost just for
yeah. So when you use when you interact with any sort of AI, that compute is generated in a data center, right? So AWS or Azure or wherever else the data center is being hosted, and it's computationally expensive. And to make that work, the companies who are offering that are charged a fee based on tokens. So a token is an abstract concept of computation. But usually if it's something more complicated, so let's say if you have a massive chunk of text, if you feed it images, or if you make it actionable, so if there's a loop involved in it, then it costs more tokens than if it's a short message like, hello, how are you? And so tokens are not fixed, but whenever you interact with AI, that costs tokens. And so as a player, the more you play this game, the more it costs us, which is a very different model than any other video game, right? So if you download StarCraft and you play StarCraft, Blizzard isn't getting charged, unless of course you're playing online on their servers, then there's a little bit of server cost. But by and large, or if you let's say you buy Minecraft, a single player game, you play Mojang or Microsoft is not getting charged anything. For us, it's different, right? We were selling this game for $12.99, and we thought, hey, look, people play for 5 hours or 10 hours, and they go crazy, then we might incur. And actually, that did happen. We had some speedrunners that, I don't know why people wanted to speedrun Suck Up, but we had some speedrunners who were just basically inputting console commands. They were like, do this, do this, and they basically try to gotcha the AI, and they were putting an enormous amount of tokens. Playing our game, in an hour they would spend like $5-10 worth of compute costs. Where in a couple hours they would spend that much. But by and large, it was manageable. That was the thing. The business model was not defined at the time too. So we were really inventing a lot of things. But compute costs, even between where we launched, which is the end of 2023, beginning 2024, so just a year from now to now, has dropped dramatically. The same model is probably 75%, 80% plus cheaper, and better models are getting the same price, if not cheaper as well. And so that's the interesting thing about building in this industry, is that the costs are continuously coming down, and what you thought wasn't possible 6 months ago or a year ago becomes possible.
Yeah, it makes sense. So do you think that we'll see more game companies, developers incorporating AI agents into their games? Why would they, and why wouldn't they?
I think it's a tough question. I think after we launched, we had a bunch of people who are both small indie studios and some of the largest gaming companies in the world reach out to us. And people were really interested in the space. But the fact is, after Suck Up came out, there has been zero commercially successful games with AI agents. Commercially successful being it is profitable by itself. Unless you've seen it, I have not seen one. No. And I think that's not because people are, and we can take that as a sign, hey, look, we can pat ourselves on the back. Congratulations, we're the best in the world. But it's also a sign that something's missing here still. When I remember, I wasn't in the space at the time, but even following as an outsider, when mobile gaming first came out, there were dozens and dozens of companies who are generating tens of millions of dollars of revenue and profit every year in the early stages of the mobile boom, right? It's the early 2010s. We have not seen that for AI. And I think AI has actually two impacts that it has. One is on, hey, can we create a different set of gameplay with agents, which is what we're doing, or with other kind of features that AI offers in real time, which I think is a real innovation on design. There is another real impact of AI, which is it drives down development costs and capabilities. Now you can make 3D assets easier, you can code easier, you can deploy easier. And this is, we're not talking about with agents, but with, coding assistants, with 3D art generations, with whatever else is integrated. And so more and more people are able to make games. And what that allows for is it allows for the supply of games to increase over time. And I think that is net of the two impacts of AI, I think that's the bigger impact, which is I think we're going to see exponentially more games being built over time and more games built by very small teams and solo developers with the assistance of AI. Which makes the whole argument of how do you have a game that stands out more challenging, if not less, because we're going to see increasing number of content in the world. It's already massive, right? And continues to grow more massive every day. That rate of growth is only going to accelerate with AI. That's, I think, is the bigger impact. So if mobile on the whole it impacts demand because it increases demand, it doubles demand. AI, I think, by and large, impacts supply. It increases supply. And that's not a good, it's a good thing if you're a consumer. It's not a good thing if you're a game developer.
Yeah, like indie game development is going to become a lot more akin to Roblox game development, where you're competing with 5 million developers instead of, I think, like 50,000 on Steam.
And it's not just indie. I think it's AA and AAA, right? Because if the market as a whole is growing 3%, 5% per year, and sometimes you have games like Lethal Company or Power World that's making $500 million to $1 billion made by a couple people, then these people really strike gold. Maybe, and obviously they didn't use AI, but imagine the future. Part of the game is built with AI assistance, whether it's in the code generation or in the asset generation. That's money that's being diverted from traditional larger game studios, right? So I think the world, if I were to have a prediction, is that it's going to become more chaotic. There's going to be massive winners like the guy who make Lethal Company or Among Us, and that you're going to see that more frequently. But the stability of the industry in which you can say, hey, look, I'm going to go build Assassin's Creed, I'm going to go build, and I'm going to guarantee to get a salary as an employee or get a amount of profit or revenue as a big gaming studio. I think that's going to become more challenging over time.
Super interesting. I have had a similar thought that like the middle is getting carved out a bit more, and people are going to the fringes of like either massive mega franchises or very indie games, and both can be successful, but also it's extremely competitive because now you've got more entities that are producing content. And it's super fascinating to think about that as a future, if it's not already here. As you think about that future, and as you think about Proxima and what you've learned from SuckUp, like, are you guys going to continue to invest in SuckUp? Is SuckUp done and you're moving on to the next project? What's next for you guys?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think on SuckUp, we built quite a few features since its launch. So we, going back to the UGC conversation, we actually built a UGC component where anyone can build their own characters. So people build like Harry Potter characters and so on. Obviously, you have to watch for IP infringements and all that. But and so that's been an interesting piece. We've also built other experiences with in the SuckUp universe. So we built a Valentine's experience in which you can break up people, and it's kind of funny. We built a rap battle mode in which you're battling you're creating rap verses and you're battling other AI in a rap arena. So there's all these game modes, I think, that continue to drive engagement, and we'll continue to invest against it, but at a fairly small level, because I think there's a run rate to the game, right?
Yeah.
No time it's gonna.
Is this DLC? Like people have to pay for each of these modes, or how are you monetizing?
It's free right now. We just drive. If we can drive engagement, then we get we get waves of new sales.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're not doing DLCs at the moment, or paid DLCs, so everything's free. But and we'll continue to invest against it. But I think at a reasonable scale that makes sense from a business perspective. I think in terms of next projects and going forward, I think there is the world is very different. I think when I signed up for Proxima, where I signed up the team and the investors into Proxima, there was a very different world order that we were seeing as a part of the pandemic and pre-pandemic. And I would argue that world order is being disrupted in a pretty dramatic way today. There's a reason why I think we're seeing a massive amounts of layoffs within industry over the last couple of years, probably one of the most unprecedented times ever. And part of that is cyclical because of overinvestment, but part of that is structural because of the way I think gaming content is evolving into similar to YouTube, right? Similar to Roblox, in which it becomes more indie, it becomes more, everybody can create games, but that has dramatic impacts on what the industry does. And how does that impact the business that I'm building moving forward? Do we build content? Do we build more content? Do we do something else? I think that's an open question for us to figure out. I signed up for this journey saying, hey, like, we're going to build a great game, we're going to ship it, and we're going to do that. We built, I think, a fairly good game and fairly innovative game. We did what we set out to do initially, but then what do we do next? How do we respond to a world that's very different today than what we've seen? And we can't have, and the playbook, the pitch deck I made in the message, and no longer apply. And so I think TBD, to be honest, it's something that I think maybe I'll write another blog post at some point about, but it is a brave new world out there for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it's still marinating, waiting to come out in inspiration in terms of blog post or in terms of the next Proxima game. That's awesome. Well, Ren, it's been awesome to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on. It was great to chat about UGC, AI agents. You really gave us a great understanding of some of gaming's top trends at the moment. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. Thanks for having me on.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.